Today we're talking about free response questions, FRQs, if you will. They are part of the AP exam and will be a part of this class in a pretty big way in terms of how you're being assessed throughout the year. So I wanted to dig in and talk about free response questions, talk about the format of them, talk about what I expect in an answer, as well as show you an example of one and talk about some tips. So what is an FRQ? FRQ stands for free response question. So when you take the AP exam in May, free response questions make up 50% of the total score. So in essence, there's 3 free response questions, and there's a separate multiple choice section. So free response questions, generally speaking, are somewhere in between what you would call a short answer question and an essay. So the way that I think of it is a short answer question is like a sprint if you're a runner, and an essay is like a marathon. So a free response question would be like a middle distance type situation where sometimes you have to write really concisely, but other times you're going to be doing things that will require more in-depth writing. So you have to be good at doing both. So usually within the question, there are 7 parts, and on the AP exam, they are timed. So what it's going to look like in this crazy format is I'm going to have mine timed, but I'm always going to give you more than the amount of time that you would get on the AP test, if that makes sense. So on the AP test, they are 25 minutes, and I would encourage you as we go throughout the year to time yourself and to make sure that when you're doing FRQs, you're getting it done kind of within that general time frame. If you're taking 50 or 55 minutes on one question, that's not going to be something that you can actually do when you take the AP exam. So we'll do a little bit of that, but I also want to make sure you have a chance to actually answer the question and get graded on what you know rather than how fast you write. So usually they're going to include some sort of visual stimulus. So what I mean by that is a chart or a photograph or, of course, a map. And maps are probably the most frequent thing that you'll see on these. And the point of these questions is to take all of the great things we've learned about in class, all of the key concepts and all of the definitions and all of the vocabulary, and actually apply it to what you see. So that is what I expect you to do, and that's what I'm going to hope to see when I grade your FRQs. All right, so let's come back to this. So FRQs frequently will have some verbs in them that you'll need to kind of know what they mean. And essentially the reason we do this is this gives you a pretty good indicator of what I expect in an answer. So there are 2 what I would call lower order prompts or lower level prompts, define and identify. So define means to provide a specific meaning for a word or a concept, and identify means to indicate or provide information about a specific topic or specified topic. So that says without elaboration or explanation. That comes straight from the AP website, but I still sometimes expect you to do a little bit of elaboration or explanation. So in general, lower level prompts usually can be answered in 1 to 3 sentences. So what I tell kids I want to see in their answers is always providing some sort of geographic example, if possible. So if I ask you something like, what is distance decay? You could give me a definition of distance decay, but what I would really like to see is for you to actually take that definition and apply it geographically. So for instance, maybe have the names of places or things like that. And what I think that does is it makes it easier for you to demonstrate that you actually know what the concept means. And that way, if your definition is a little bit shaky, oftentimes it can kind of be bailed out by that example. All right, now to the other ones, higher level prompts. Compare, describe, and explain. And I'm not going to read the definitions of each of these, but generally speaking, when you see compare, when you see describe, when you see explained, those answers should be longer. They should go beyond just the pure identification of things and get into describing some of the geographic, I never finished that sentence, but get into describing some of the geographic patterns and processes that created what we're talking about. So for example, if you are comparing things, then you need to talk about both of the things that you're comparing, right? You're not going to get a point if you're comparing 2 things and you don't talk about them both. So you need to actually give me complete answers, and you actually need to be talking about a lot of the geographic examples but also some of the patterns and processes that create what that looks like. Okay, so this is a sample question. It is about something you don't know about too much, probably yet. You'll learn a lot about dairy farms later in the year, but this is the example of it. So pause it and get a sense of what the mix of questions looks like. So you'll see in this one, it has three identifies and two describes, right? So you would be able to answer part A, part B, and part C um, relatively easily. If you're identifying one spatial pattern, again, give me a couple sentences, give me the names of places. But generally speaking, you should be able to do that without a whole lot of time. The last part D and part E is where you would spend more time, where you would write short paragraphs, where you would actually apply a lot of what you know in specific circumstances with descriptions of patterns, with descriptions of the types of concepts and processes that create all of this wonderful map of dairy farms that we see, right? And one thing to note, if this were an actual FRQ, which I don't know, maybe it was, but if this was an actual FRQ, it would have a part F and a part G. But I wanted one that would fit on the page, so I chose one with 5 prompts. Okay, so 2 more slides. How they are scored. So because they have 7 parts, each one is worth a point. So 7 points is the goal. Either you satisfactorily answer or you do not. You either get a point or you don't get a point, and there's not a whole lot of in between. So you can write a pretty good response sometimes and still not get a point because I use a rubric that specifically is looking for information. And if you write something that gets right up to the edge of that but doesn't quite give me the information, then you don't get the point. So that will help us become better writers, more concise writers, but also people who are good at giving explanations, hopefully. And when you do this in my class for a grade, oftentimes I will translate that to a number grade. So you can see the scale below that I'll use throughout the year. And occasionally I'll give half points, but half points are not a thing on the AP test. All right, so tips of the trade, tricks of the trade. I guess tricks of the trade is the actual thing people say, but tips of the trade for this. So biggest thing, pay attention to the verb in the question. That is telling you specifically how much I'm looking for, what I expect you to do. If you are seeing identify and you're giving me a couple words, then maybe that's enough to answer the question. If you see describe, but you give me like a sentence, you're not going to get a point because I'm not going to give it to you because you didn't do enough. Other things, always write a little more than you think you need to. So I would say it is hard to strike a balance in here of writing concisely, but also writing enough that you need to get all the points that you need to. So I would say always, always, always try to write a little bit more than you think you need to, and include specific reference to what I call speed-related patterns or processes. So just as a reminder, speed stands for social, political, economic, environmental, and demographic. So I should see some of that in your answer for pretty much any answer related to something social, political, economic, environmental, or demographic. When you get them back after you're done, always do corrections and retakes because these are going to be hard and you're going to want points. And the last one we already talked about, include geographic examples. So tie it back to the stimulus, tie it back to the map that you see. Talk about what you actually see in the graphic, okay? Because that is what the question's asking about. All right, so we're going to give this a shot, see how it goes. Thanks.